Hello, my name is Catrice, and today I am going to read you a story that I wrote. This is an adult fairy tale, and like most stories, it's not just a story. So pay attention, because there will be a quiz. So, let's get started. Without further ado, let me entertain you. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a servant girl who traversed the same path every day to fetch water. One day, as she was walking down the path, she spied a foal that had been abandoned. The poor thing couldn't even stand up, looked as though it hadn't eaten in days, and was in desperate need of water. Though the girl was small, she dragged the foal to the river and collapsed, exhausted, on the riverbank. The foal was consumed with drinking as she drifted off to sleep. Unbeknownst to the girl, or the foal, a boy had been spying them from the bushes across the river. Taking great care not to startle the foal, the boy walked downstream, crossed the river, and crept up behind the tiny animal, snatching it without disturbing the girl. The girl awoke in a strange room. She was lying in a rather uncomfortable bed, and as she sat up and looked around, she noticed an old woman sitting in the corner. She could barely make out her face, as it was twilight and there were no lamps or candles in the musty room. The dank air made the girl's nose crinkle. "Come no closer, my dear. From this day forward, you will live in this tower. During the night, sustenance will be delivered. The only way to escape living out your life alone in this tower is to convince someone to rescue you. I have placed a spell on you, such that you cannot cut your hair, lest you die. You cannot speak of this spell, or it will be broken, taking the tower down with it. You will die anyway." The girl blinked, and the old woman was gone, vanished. The old woman's words rang in her ears. "You cannot cut your hair, lest you die." She shuddered. Looking out over the landscape, it was obvious to the girl that crying out would be futile. There was nothing, and no one around for miles. Miles and miles of nothing, but rolling hills, grass, trees, flowers. She rushed to the window, screaming for help anyway, as is expected of little girls. Gripping the windowsill, she pricked her finger on a thorn. Looking down the tower, the girl realized that it was covered in roses. Roses and bees. Though the beautiful blossoms were a sight to behold, and a brilliant bouquet to breathe, the thick thorns were a formidable foe for anyone looking to scale her citadel. The buzzing of the bees lulled the girl back to sleep. No one would be clambering into her chamber anytime soon. Days turned to weeks, turned to months, turned to years, and as time passed, the girl grew into a lady. A lady with long, flaxen hair. Her cries for help eventually attracted some passers-by, but no one would respond to her pleas. Most believed that the girl was crazy. "That must be why she's locked up in that tower," exclaimed more than a few. A woman scoffed as a troupe of circus performers strode by. "She must have her reasons for being up there, though I can hardly think of any good ones." The lady in the tower thought that it was an ironic statement, coming from someone who, judging by her unfortunately unflattering culottes, was probably the wife of an illusionist or lion tamer. Oh yes, the lady was quite intelligent. Fortunately for her, books were considered sustenance, and when she was finished with one, she would leave it on the tray, and a new one would be delivered with breakfast. Oh yes, it was an odd sort of life for the lady, being locked in a tower. Though she was provided for well enough, and educated in her own way, everyone below was convinced that it was she that was stupid, that it was she that was despicable. Oh yes, it continued. Many suggested that the lady cut her hair to fashion a rope to drop down, but the lady could not. Again and again, the old woman's words rang in her ears. I have placed a spell on you, such that you cannot cut your hair, lest you die. When she refused, the travelers would go on their merry way, laughing to themselves about the beautiful, but crazy, lady in the tower. Every time someone insulted her, she thought of the blade that had been provided since the first day. Speaking of the first day, the boy captured the foal, easily and without waking the girl. He felt guilty for a second, stealing the girl's foal, but he was desperate. The foal would fetch a fair price in the marketplace. Perhaps if he was lucky, he could find work with some lord or gentleman. Fortunately for the boy, his wish was granted. He was hired by an elderly gentleman whose large estate had no surviving heirs and was supported by two most fantastic industries. The gentleman maintained a most magnificent rose garden and entertained many guests as a result. The gentleman also maintained a most majestic apiary and entertained many guests as a result. Guests traveled for miles to smell the gentleman's roses and taste the sweet honey of his bees. On slow days, the gentleman would send the boy into town with the foal to sell the beeswax to merchants. On busy days, the boy tended to the roses and the bees. In the evenings, the boy was treated to an exquisite education from renowned private tutors, more often than not while a nurse tended his scratches and stings. Days turned to weeks, turned to months, turned to years, and as time passed, the boy grew into a gentleman with a thick skin, a thoroughbred steed, and a sagacious talent for problem solving. Mistress of this fortress, let down your hair! The gentleman could hardly believe his luck as he spied the maiden combing her hair through the window. He intended to impress the beautiful flaxen-haired maiden by climbing the tower despite the thorns and bees, but he lacked a rope of his own, and there was no lattice. Upon hearing this, the lady thought she would die of shock. She braided her hair loosely, and since it was a blustery day, fastened the end to the blade before dropping them to the ground below. When the gentleman saw the lady up close for the first time, he recognized her immediately. The lady had recognized the foal, and though she didn't know everything, she knew enough. If it hadn't been for that foal, neither of us would be here right now. Do you really think that he likes being bridled? Set him free and stay here with me. The lady sensed the gentleman's trepidation, but assuaged his concern. The foal is now a strong horse, magnificent in his own way. Surely someone else will come along for him. He is certainly a catch, and has never had problems with being provided for in the past, as we will be here in the tower. And with that, the gentleman waved the horse away, and the thoroughbred steed obeyed his master's command for the last time. The lady and the gentleman lived happily ever after in the tower together, at last. As time went on, and their story continued to unfold, they came to realize that the old woman had actually done them both a favor, whether she had intended to or not, by orchestrating these events. For it is not necessary to escape the tower in order to be rescued from loneliness. But wait, it could have happened like this. Every time someone insulted her, she thought of the blade that had been provided since the first day. And so it came to pass one day that a crowd gathered below the tower. Strangely enough, the crowd had assembled over a bidding war between an Egyptian trader and a Hyksos. It was like trying to explain to someone the difference between what red and yellow look like, or how a blueberry smells as opposed to the way an apple smells. The lady remembered her nurse Jasmine telling her so many years ago, You can count 1,000 grapes, but there's no accounting for taste. The lady immediately recognized the opportunity. Surely someone in that angry mob would take pity on her. She whistled down to the crowd below and quickly got their attention. Fortunately, she was more interesting than watching someone argue with the illiterate. Unfortunately, she found herself the new victim of their taunts. Try as she might to explain to the crowd below that she had been tricked, pleading to be rescued, the answer to her problem suddenly became clear to her. None of them believed in magic. The lady couldn't tell the crowd that she had been put under a spell, or the tower would collapse and all of them would die. However, the lady reasoned, someone should have suggested it as a possible option by now, but instead, everyone insisted that she was crazy or stupid. The lady took this in for a minute, and then she reached for the blade. The lady held the cold metal object in her left hand, and the whole mane of her flaxen hair in her right hand. The lady considered the gravity of her action for no more than a moment. With determination, she